The story begins as a system displays a one-on-one combat match between Yangyu and Zufu. Yangyu, the Rizzler, stood ready on the stage, while Zufu, a hot baddie, appeared absolutely certain. The audience watched the weird matchup. Word spread fast. Nobody had ever beaten the Valkyries since Million Game Girls launched. And then there was Yangyu, pulling it off with the fortune teller class, the class everyone saw as total garbage. Some called it dumb luck, and even threw around accusations of smurfing. Zufu shook off the shock and jumped right back into action, as air around her humming with energy. She unleashed her Blade Blossom technique. The crowd knew instantly that their goddess was about to remind everyone why she was undefeated. Blades came flying at Yangyu from every direction, the crowd thinking he was about to get shredded. But instead of backing off, he just stood there, smirking like he had all the time in the world. Then, he sprang into the air, snatching one of the blades mid-flight. Then bent backward, letting the rest of the attacks whoosh past him. Zufu in shock. Before she could react, Yangyu was behind her, locking her in place with the blade at her neck. The arena exploded with cheers as the system announced Yangyu as the champion. The crowd lost their minds over the first person to ever take down their so-called goddess. Yangyu soaking up the praise. Later, Zufu stepped forward, handing him a trophy. She admitted his strength and called him a true hero. Yangyu, who had been all smug just moments ago, overwhelmed by the attention. Back in reality, Yangyu leaned back in his chair as the victory secured. His mind immediately drifted to Zufu, thinking that he had won from a capturable character. A mix of excitement and second-hand embarrassment washed over him. With a smirk, he is thinking that the responsibility of romancing the precious Valkyrie was now his burden to bear. His computer screen suddenly glitched. An unexpected pop-up appeared. The screen prompted him to choose between yes or no. Still high on his win and annoyed by the interruption, he clicked yes. The screen flickered, symbols flashed, and a blinding light shot at his face before he could even react. And then, his breath caught as a hand slipped out of the screen. Before he could even blink, Zufu stepped through. Glowing with mana like reality just gave her a VIP pass. Fueled by rage, Zufu slammed Yangyu beneath her without warning, her plots pinning him down as she closed the distance in a flash. His brain short-circuited at the sudden closeness, but she shut him up fast. The door burst open. Zufu saw two men, drew her blade, and in a flash, dropped one with a clean throw, blood pooling as Yangyu stared from beneath her, stunned. Yangyu shot up, panicked, yelling that she just erased a guy. But Zufu ignored him, eyes locked on the next threat. The second man lunged like a zombie. She slashed him down in a blink, dropping him beside the first. Moments later, the corpses crumbled into piles of gold. Yangyu froze, brain short-circuiting, zombies turning into coins now. Meanwhile, Zufu casually sheathed her sword, watching him lose it like it was just another Tuesday. Seeing him tremble, she placed a hand on his shoulder and said this wasn't a dream. The game world was bleeding into reality. His shock deepened when she revealed the school was now an instance dungeon. Rushing to the window, he froze. His classmates had turned into zombies. Zufu continued, explaining that unless they completed the dungeon, they would be completely swallowed by the game world. Yangyu's gaze swept over the entire dormitory, now surrounded by hordes of undead. Before he could process everything, Zufu was already slashing zombies like she was on Fruit Ninja, clearing a path through the chaos. Terrified, Yangyu yelled at his classmates, frantically trying to distance himself from the carnage, insisting that none of this was his fault. He pointed at Zufu, claiming she was the one erasing them, and that he had nothing to do with it. However, the zombies kept advancing. With the area momentarily secured, Zufu called out to him, telling him to move. The next moment, she grabbed his hand and pulled him along as they ran. His mind was doing backflips. This whole game world invading reality thing felt more like some glitchy DLC no one asked for. Before he could make sense of it, Zufu provided more insight while slashing another zombie. She explained that in their attempt to make money and satisfy player demands, the developers had messed up so bad, they made the game mechanics kneel before the final boss. Reaching a new site filled with smoke, she pushed open a door and continued, stating that the game world had now awakened. It had developed its own consciousness, and its first objective was revenge against bum humans like him. As they rushed toward dorm, Yangyu's eyes darted across the ruined campus. Tall buildings loomed in the distance, thick smoke rising from the ground. His mind raced as he suddenly remembered something. There used to be zombies in Million Game Girls. A realization struck him that this was the Halloween-themed carnival dungeon, the land of the walking dead. It was the very first dungeon in the game that allowed players to massacre endless waves of enemies, a mode designed for the sheer thrill of mowing down thousands like in a Musou game. Determination welled up inside him as he turned to Zufu, demanding to know why she hadn't told him sooner. He grabbed what appeared to be a broomstick, convinced that clearing this dungeon should be easy since the zombies were supposed to be laughably feeble. However, as the first zombie charged toward him, wielding a massive double-ended chainsaw, his confidence skyrocketed. With a determined grin, he braced himself for the attack, only to watch in horror as the zombie's weapon sliced clean through his makeshift broom, leaving him defenseless. Panic set in as he wondered why the zombie was wielding such a monstrous weapon, one designed specifically for humans to torment the undead. Before he could react, a sinister sound echoed through the battlefield. Turning toward the source, he saw a zombie strapped to a charging electric chair, rolling toward him with dark intent. Overwhelmed with fear, Yangyou instinctively ran behind Zufu for protection. Remaining composed, she reminded him of the game world's thirst for revenge. As the zombies surrounded them, Zufu shielded him with her presence, stating that, naturally, they would now see both of them as mere weak mobs. The roles had been reversed in this Musou dungeon. As the undead forces charged toward them, she steadied herself, gripping her blade, ready for the battle ahead. Blades appeared in the air, swirling rapidly as Zufu unleashed her Blade Blossom technique. The intense mana surge wrapped around her. She quickly realized things were going south fast. One look at the always terrified Yangyou, and she knew there was no other option left. A zombie wielding a massive weapon charged at her. In a split second, she leaped into the air and delivered a fierce kick, sending the undead creature crashing to the ground with its own weapon, cracking the floor beneath it.
Realizing how dire the situation was,
She grabbed Yangyou and quickly pulled them both to safety, leaving the zombies behind. As they landed, she turned to him with a serious expression and told him that her mana was running low. If he wanted to survive, he'd have to rely on himself. Yangyou barely processed her words when Zufu extended her glowing hand, bestowing the Valkyrie's blessing to unlock his true power. Stunned, he awkwardly wondered if this meant she now belonged to him. Before he could think further, she pulled him into a tight embrace, her warmth overwhelming him just as a brilliant explosion erupted, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The zombies roared in the distance. Yangyou, amazed, looked down to see his outfit transformed into that of his in-game class. Realizing the blessing had taken full effect, Zufu explained that she had used her power to help him break the final barrier between reality and the game, fully integrating him into this world. Yangyou's excitement surged as he realized he had officially become a fortune teller, just like in the game. The system displayed a glowing blue mana pool with a free single draw. Weapons of S, A, B, and C ranks appeared. Zufu casually explained it was a special newbie gift, offering the chance to get an S-class weapon with a unique ability, like Talent Reset, and the power to boost one attribute to its maximum before each battle. Zufu instructed him to choose his talent for this battle. Eagerly, he picked up Javelin and made his selection. This time, fate rewarded a noob like him, as he rolled an S-rank weapon. Grinning with satisfaction, he decided to enjoy this moment to the fullest. The weapon materialized in his hands was a flamethrower. Back on the battlefield, as the zombies came rushing in, Yangyou tightened his grip on his weapon, ready to rock and roll, as he told his former classmates not to hold it against him since he was only doing this to turn them back into humans. Then, without hesitation, he unleashed a roaring inferno, reducing the undead to nothing but sizzling ash. Flames erupted, wild and untamed, devouring everything in their path. Watching the destruction unfold, he couldn't help but enjoy it a little, this sheer, unstoppable power now resting in his hands. Holding the flamethrower firmly, he marveled at its strength. This was the true blessing of the Valkyrie. At last, he could fight just like he was inside the game. Zufu reminded him that she had only given him this blessing because of the emergency. Besides, unlike in the game, his level was still low. Even with an S-rank weapon, the rest of his attributes remained that of a complete noob. Yangyou, unbothered, reassured her that his level wasn't an issue. He then confirming her that clearing this dungeon would restore everything to normal. Zufu admitted that it would. Without hesitation, Yangyou offered his apologies to his alma mater. Then, without another thought, he unleashed a torrent of flames, setting the entire dungeon ablaze. Zufu, realizing what he was about to do, rushed to stop him, but it was already too late. As the flames spread, forcing the zombies to flee, Yangyou observed the situation with satisfaction. Just as he predicted, the rewards were flowing in steadily. Zufu acknowledged that he had cleverly taken advantage of environmental damage. Yang Yu smirked, explaining that this game always prided itself on a physics engine designed to simulate real life. The developers had programmed environmental effects like burning, electric shocks, and frostbite, among others. He recalled using this exact trick when he was at a lower level. He further elaborated that environmental hazards dealt fixed damage, ignoring base defense. When used wisely, even low-level players could pose a threat to high-level ones. Listening to his meltdown, Zufu found the strategy somewhat silly, but she couldn't deny its effectiveness. His deep understanding of the game gave him an edge in handling situations like this. Suddenly, out of nowhere a thought hit him. Only partners approved by Valkyrie received blessings in the game. Hesitating, Yang Yu awkwardly called out to her, fumbling over his words as he asked if he could call her his wife. Zufu's expression darkened instantly. With a furious outburst, she shot him down on the spot, snapping that the blessing wasn't some special treatment, just an emergency measure. Annoyed, she pushed him away, but in doing so, she accidentally knocked him off balance. As Yang Yu stumbled, nearly face-planting, Zufu instinctively grabbed his hand to steady him. But in her rush, pressing her premium plots against the edge and leaning down, giving him a very up-close and personal view. Flustered by the unexpected closeness, Yang Yu's face turned red as he shyly responded that he was fine. Zufu quickly realized what had happened and let go, turning away with an embarrassed hug. Regaining his footing, Yang Yu breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that it had been a close call. Zufu shifted her focus back to their surroundings as something didn't feel right. She wondered if they had actually cleared the stage when suddenly, more zombies appeared. Before Yang Yu could react, he found himself pressed under something soft with a faintly sweet scent, as Zufu had fallen on top of him. Perhaps she was trying to hide, or maybe she had simply lost her balance, but either way, he was now trapped beneath her soft plots. Feeling the weight of her plots pressing against his face, Yang Yu flustered, but it was like his brain short-circuited, as he shyly remarked that his dear wife should probably get up first. Zufu's face turned scarlet as she hastily crossed her arms over her chest, shooting him a flustered glare. Yang Yu quickly agreed, though his attention shifted to a more pressing matter. He pointed out that they had company. The ground suddenly cracked open as zombies emerged, breaking through with unnatural strength. They moved with ghostly power. Yang Yu scanning the R and realized this place was missing combustible items around. That meant they couldn't rely on environmental damage this time. As he felt something off, the zombies seemed stronger than before. Zufu noticed it too, deducing that as their world merged further with the game world, the undead were growing in power. While Yang Yu checks the system. Realizing she was running low on mana, Yang Yu handed her a potion they had collected earlier. She took it. Yang Yu then assessed his weapon situation, noting that his flamethrower was only effective at close and medium range. He told Zufu to handle the long-range enemies. Zufu stating there was no need to remind her. She wouldn't miss a single one of those sniping cowards. As the zombies swarmed toward them, Zufu unleashed her Blade Blossom technique, while Yang Yu set the horde ablaze with his flamethrower. The battlefield was engulfed in fire. Then, growl cut through the chaos. Suddenly, a zombie dressed like a low-budget Kanye West, wielding a massive sniper rifle, took aim at Yang Yu from behind, preparing to fire. Completely unaware of the danger, Yang Yu was about to be taken out when Zufu caught sight of the threat. Without hesitation, she moved in a swift circular motion, intercepting the attack and saving him just in time. Yang Yu, relieved, grinned and commented that, as expected from his wife, they made great partners. Then a chill ran down his spine as Yang Yu recalled on the battlefield. The zombies weren't just growling mindlessly. They were murmuring words. He recalled they were saying bizarre phrases, catfire, brave GP, mean outlanders, and even something about playing Gwent. Zufu's cheeks turned red as she looked away, muttering for him to stop saying such things. Though she'd never admit it, deep down, she kinda liked it. Later, Yang Yu realized his flamethrower was overheating and needed time to cool down. Without hesitation, he grabbed Zufu's hand, urging her to retreat tactically. Zufu, however, warned him to slow down, pointing out that the terrain was complex and labyrinthine. Running blindly would only lead them straight into more monsters. But Yang Yu, lost in his own thoughts and confident in his knowledge of the game, paid little attention and continued pulling her along. He assured her that he was familiar with this zombie map. It was just like in the game. Suddenly they stopped, as two large waves of darkness would spawn at this very location. Realizing they had no choice but to defeat them to proceed. Suddenly, two massive figures loomed out of the darkness, their oversized melons looking like they might explode at any moment. With deep, guttural growls, they snarled threats, vowing to dissect the intruders where they stood. Yangyo, momentarily distracted, couldn't help but admire their generous proportions, noting that they were even chestier than in the game. Realizing his slip, he quickly cleared him that he meant more menacing. Zufu, catching him practically drooling, advised him to at least pretend he had some self-control. The zombies roared and charged toward them. Yangyu readied his flamethrower, unleashing a stream of fire. However, he was shocked to see that his target didn't burn to death immediately. Just as the zombie prepared to counterattack on him, Zufu stepped in, her blade blossom technique slicing through its body. But she turned and saw Yangyu in a bad state. Despite wielding an S-class weapon, his basic stats were still too low to take down such high-level enemies instantly. Worse, as he realized, that last attack had left him with the status conditions pain and bleed. Zufu quickly warned him again as another zombie lunged at him from behind. Yangyu, barely reacting in time, thanked his wifey for the heads up before retaliating with a powerful kick. However, his foot landed right between the zombies' massive plots, sinking deep into the fleshy masses, like a helpless ball caught between two very lavish cushions. Cringing at the awkwardness, Yangyu didn't hesitate. He shoved the flamethrower directly into the zombie's mouth. Apologizing for the rough treatment, he ignited the flames, setting the creature ablaze from the inside. The zombie collapsed to the ground, its face engulfed in fire. Yangyu took a deep breath, finally regaining some composure. As expected, head attacks caused critical damage. The only downside was that aiming properly with a flamethrower was trickier than he thought. Zufu, slightly surprised, teased that she had expected him to get distracted when fighting female monsters. Yet, somehow, he had actually managed to take one down all by himself. She suggested he heal up since he looked pretty roughed up. But Yangyu remained relaxed. He reassured her that if everything in this world functioned just like the game, then Exp would follow the same rules. He confidently stated that just erasing these two elite zombies would be enough for him to level up. And once he leveled up, all his HP would be fully restored. Excited to think about extra bonus, he checked the system notifications, while Reminder 1, upon leveling up, he had unlocked a new skill and gained an additional 15% legendary item drop rate when erasing monsters. And Reminder 2, due to his contact effect with the Valkyrie, Zufu, he received plus 4 points to all attributes whenever he leveled up. Yangyu amazed, as he absolutely loved these perks. As they stood before the system interface, the two fallen zombies lay lifeless on the ground. Unbeknownst to them, deep within a nearby church, a sinister figure swirled a wine bottle in his hand, a twisted grin creeping across his face. The vampire had found his next target, and the woman's blood smelled absolutely divine. Standing before the ghostly church, Yangyo and Zufu braced themselves. The boss of Zombieland resided within these cursed walls. Zufu, still in disbelief, tried to understand why a church stood in the middle of a cemetery. Before they dwell on it, the massive doors creaked open. Bats flickered inside, revealing the master of the domain. Seated on a grand chair, a sinister vampire grinned, his yellow teeth gleaming under the dim light. He casually swirled a wine bottle in his hand, his voice dripping with amusement as he praised their ability to find him. Flashing his ugly, decayed smile, he declared that their good fortune had come to an end the moment they stepped into his lair. Yangyo stared at the vampire, something about him feeling oddly familiar. Then it hit him, the vampire boss looked eerily like his school janitor, who owns golden teeth. Zufu, still adjusting to the bizarre reality of this world, found it strange that even a boss character had fused with someone from real life. The vampire suddenly snapped the bottle in his grip, rising from his seat. His hungry gaze lingered on her intoxicating curves, and with a wicked grin, he boasted about sinking his golden teeth into her premium-grade meat later. Disgusted, Zufu wasted no time. She unleashed her blade blossom technique, summoning a storm of blades that surged toward the vampire. But as the steel passed through his form without leaving a single scratch, he erupted into mocking laughter, declaring her attacks too weak. Before she could react, he vanished and reappeared behind her in a blink. A chilling hand clamped around Zufu's face as his tongue lolled out grotesquely, whispering with twisted delight about how he savored the taste of beautiful women's blood. But just as he prepared to sink his fangs into her, a powerful fist crashed into his jaw. Yangyo, eyes blazing with fury, had struck with all his might. The vampire staggered back, his golden teeth hitting the floor like loose change. Horrified, the vampire staring at his fallen teeth in disbelief. They had been with him for so long, yet they chose to betray him. Yangyo wasted no time, pulling Zufu close against him, her soft curves pressing against his body. He warned the vampire that he would not let him touch even a single strand of her hair. The vampire, seething with rage, launched himself at Yangyo, vowing to crush him. But Yangyo smirked. He had a trick up his sleeve that had once been troublesome for others, but worked wonders for him. Raising his flamethrower, he unleashed a wave of fire. The vampire, thinking quickly, transformed into mist, believing himself immune to physical attacks. Yangyo, unfazed, tilted his head, so he was immune to physical damage in mist form. Bad for him as the flamethrower dealt magic damage. The vampire's confidence crumbled. Reverting to his solid form, he seethed with unrestrained fury, deciding to finish him off without relying on his mist form. He lunged at Yangyo with a relentless flurry of attacks, but Yangyo slipped through them effortlessly, like the dodging rat he was, weaving through every strike with infuriating ease. The vampire grew desperate. It shouldn't be possible that Yangyo kept predicting his every move. Yangyo grinned, thinking that he had died 5 times here when the game first launched. But this would be his 722nd time finishing him off. The vampire barely had time to react before fire engulfed him. Within a minute, his body crumbled into ash, his final words filled with disbelief. It was impossible. He could not lose like this. Later, as Yangyo basked in his own greatness, he figured it was only fair to claim his well-earned reward, as squeezing Zufu's melons. But before he could make his move, she shut him down with a firm hand, telling him not to get too cocky just for defeating a monster. As Yangyo turned away, grumbling about unfair treatment, Zufu let out a sigh. This was tough. He did just save her, and she did want to reward him, but letting him touch her was a bit much. Maybe next time, she thought, smirking to herself, to let him sweat over it a little. As Yangyo checks the system, a notification pops up, congratulating him on reaching level 3. A rare material appears as his reward is the vampire's ancestral gold tooth X1. He stares at it, surprised by the unexpected reward. Before he can process it, another tremor shakes the ground beneath them. Zufu comments that after defeating the boss, the fusion of the game world and reality is becoming unstable again. Suddenly, rocks loosen from above, and one strikes him on the head. His vision blurs as he curses his luck, thinking this must be the worst possible way to go. Regaining consciousness, he feels something soft against his face. The sensation is too real to be a dream. Opening his eyes, he sees a hot figure with impossibly large plots. He finds himself on top of her. Her voice is sultry as she asks about his little nap. Recognition hits. This is the vampire's queen, the boss he was supposed to defeat. Instinctively, he scrambles back, grabbing his flamethrower and pointing it at her. She barely reacts, gracefully rising from the bed, her massive assets jiggling with the movement. She tells him to put away his silly toys as it is time for her to feed. Confusion grips him as he nearly ascends to heaven at the sight. As she steps closer, her generous plots inches toward him. Panicked, he yells for her to keep those melon plots away. His grip on the flamethrower falters, and the weapon slips from his hands. He realizes too late that she is far stronger than him. She places her foot on him, pinning him down effortlessly as she was about to jizz him up. As she teased him, accusing him of undressing her with his gaze and asking if he fancied her curves. She leans down on him, exposing even more of her, claiming that boys his age are always on fire about these things. Flustered, he denies it, insisting he already has a wife. But she lifts him by his shirt with ease, pulling him closer. His mind races as he internally screams for Zufu to come save him. He isn't sure how much longer he can resist. Wrapping her arms around him, she trapped him in the pillowy depths of her curves, whispering seductively that they should have some fun before she completely drained him dry. Just as his fate seems sealed, the door bursts open. A familiar voice calls out, searching for her contractor. Zufu steps in, confusion flickering across her face before shock sets in. She takes in the scene, Yangyo smothered against her overwhelming plots. She smirks, claiming that his contractor now belongs to her. He quickly protests, but Zufu's eyes blaze with fury. She snaps, "This high-level boss shouldn't be here." Vampire Queen's expression darkens as she shifts into battle mode. She tightens her grip, keeping Yangyo pressed against her. Mocking Zufu, she remarks that she isn't the only NPC out of the ordinary. Dark energy swirls around the vampire queen as she raises her hand, summoning the Dark Kiva. A swarm of dreadful bats fills the air. The vampire queen gives a single command to drain her dry. The bats screech as they descend upon Zufu, who barely manages to raise her arms to shield herself. The vampire queen held Yangyo close to her assets, her grip firm as he shouted for his wife. She assuring him that no one would interrupt their fun time, claiming she had already taken care of Zufu. Hearing this, Zufu's fury ignited. The vampire queen had underestimated her, and that was a mistake. A blue, glowing box materialized in Zufu's hands, pulsating with an intense energy drawn from her mana. The vampire queen's eyes widened in shock, unable to comprehend how Zufu had been hiding so much power. Shrieking, she warned Zufu not to come closer, keeping Yangyo lifted in her grasp. As she grinned, Yangyo's hand accidentally landed on her generous plot. His brain refused to let go of the sensory data. Meanwhile, Zufu made her move. Since the vampire queen was a creature of the night, there was only one proper way to deal with her. Summoning an S-rank weapon, she materialized a replica of the Spear of the Sun. Yangyo, still pressed against the vampire queen assets, suddenly felt weaker as he desperately tried to look away. Sensing the danger, the vampire queen loosened her grip, shifting her focus entirely to counter the incoming attack. Yangyo swiftly pushed off the ground with one hand and kicked back, smirking as he declared he had fooled her. He mocked her for thinking he was charmed by her bigger plots, then turned and ran, ignoring the vampire queen's warning not to get carried away. He laughed smugly, saying if she believed bigger plots alone were enough, she was mistaken. His wife belongs to much bigger and better plots than her. As she lunged at him, he dodged every attack effortlessly. She scoffed at his attempt to hide, calling him a silly boy and stating that he could never defeat her. She didn't even intend to fight him, her level was too low for that. Yangyo smirked, thinking the vampire queen was distracted, as his wife had fully charged up her attack. In the next instant, Zufu unleashed a devastating strike, declaring that this was her true strength. The vampire queen let out an ear-piercing scream as energy engulfed her body. Yangyo exhaled, finally relaxing as he checked his system. He muttered about nearly being smothered by her big plots, then immediately turned to cling to Zufu, showering her with affection and claiming they were a perfect match. But then he noticed her swaying, holding her head in dizziness. She weakly admitted that she had used too much energy. He grew concerned, pulling her close and offering MP potions, but she explained in a faint voice that her core data had been damaged. She had already drained too much energy leaving the game space. Now she needed rest. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed as the wall shattered. They were back at school. Yangyo told her to hang in there, promising to handle the next battle. Just then, an old man appeared, questioning what they were doing. Yangyo's eyes widened in shock as he recognized the school headmaster. The old man inspected Zufu, noticing her weakened state, and reached out to hold her hand, stating that she needed to be taken to the infirmary. Yangyo tried to explain the situation, but something felt off. He froze as he noticed a health bar floating above the headmaster's head. His blood ran cold. This wasn't the headmaster. The old man's lips curled into a sinister grin. In an instant, his form twisted, transforming into a dreadful, plant-like creature. Vines shot out, wrapping around Zufu as the creature claimed that she belongs to him now. Yangyo gripped his sword tightly as he assessed the dire situation. Realizing the intensity of the situation, Yangyo grabbed his flamethrower, thinking that if the headmaster was the final boss of the dungeon, then defeating him would restore the world to normal. The creature scoffed, addressing Yangyo directly. He mocked him for believing he could destroy his kingdom, calling him a loser. This school was now a playground under his control. His glowing red eyes burned with fury as he sneered, pointing out that Yangyo's baddie was heavily injured and now his plaything. Zufu, struggling against the vines constricting her, gasped as they tightened around her body. She gritted her teeth and muttered that the creature's level was low, making it impossible for him to do anything here. Yangyo, anger flaring in his eyes, shouted at the old fossil to release his wife. Without hesitation, he fired his flamethrower, sending a stream of burning fire toward the creature, attempting to roast him alive. But the attack had no effect. The creature absorbed the flames, gulping them down effortlessly. Yangyo's eyes widened in shock as he took a step back. A sigh of relief escaped the creature's lips, but then something green flashed across his body. His expression twisted in confusion for a moment before a sudden explosion blasted him backward. Yang Yo crashed onto the floor, barely catching himself with one hand. Huffing under the strain, he tried to regain his balance, but before he could stand, the creature moved swiftly through the air. A massive surge of green material erupted from its body, bursts down onto Yang Yo. Zufu, still trapped, fearfully called out to her contractor as the vines slithered across her, entangling her limbs and overwhelming plots. The creature, grinning wickedly, moves closer to her hot trapped figure, declaring that Yang Yo had been expelled from the school. Its vines crept further, brushing against Zufu as it taunted that she would be thoroughly trained next. Suddenly, Yang Yo burst out of the green material, standing tall, confronting the creature head-on. That fireball had barely been enough to warm him up. Lifting a large blade, he remarked that an attack with such an obvious telegraph was easy to read. With a powerful leap, he launched himself forward, slashing through all the vines restraining Zufu. Catching her effortlessly with one arm, he landed gracefully, setting her down gently. His voice was steady as he reassured her that he had come to save his wife. Zufu's cheeks turned red as she looked away, but despite her flustered protests, she couldn't help but secretly enjoy hearing it. Turning their gaze back to the creature, she warned him to stay alert. That guy was still alive and well. The creature roared furiously, extending his vines once again. He mocked Yang Yo for discarding his powerful weapon, questioning what he could possibly do with a mere piece of scrap metal. Yang Yo unfazed, lunging forward, he scoffed at the creature's words, saying he wasn't someone who relied only on S-class weapons. Even a basic iron sword dropped by a zombie would be more than enough to finish him. Drawing his sword, he began slashing through the extending vines, advancing steadily. As he said, the creature had no idea how difficult it was to play as a fortune teller in this game. He had no clue how much effort Yang Yo had put in, how many times he had to restart, just to finally meet Valkyrie Zufu. Every strike tore through the monster's limbs as Yang Yo continued pushing forward. The creature's health bar flickered, turning red. With one final slash, the last of the vines were reduced to shreds. The creature trembled, gritting its teeth in anger. It sneered at Yang Yo, insisting that his weapon was just a useless piece of scrap metal. But Yang Yo simply checked his system and smirked. The system confirmed that both critical damage and precise strikes aimed at the creature's weak points could break its defenses. Yang Yo now could see all of its weaknesses at a glance. An explosion sent flames crackling as a creature screamed in agony, cursing Yang Yo and vowing to burn him to a crisp. Yang Yo scoffed, thinking it still dared to use such an attack on him. He muttered that interrupting the attack would deal massive damage. Leaping forward, his weapon clashed, and the next moment, the headmaster monster exploded, crying out that it would expel him from school. Moving swiftly, Yang Yo decided to end it, picking up his sword and smirking as he declared the creature would soon turn into his X points and gold coins. Before he could attack, suddenly a freezing stab shot through the air. Zufu noticed first, panicking as she warned him. Yang Yo barely managed to dodge. The ice blade struck the creature, causing it to scream loud as its health bar dropped significantly. Yang Yo turned fearfully, eyes narrowing. Someone had just stolen his crush. Footsteps echoed as a girl with twin ponytails landed, her ponytails spinning like helicopter blades. A whirl of chakra hovered before her, and another figure appeared beside her. Yang Yo recognized Manmin, the prettiest girl in school with the biggest plots. Zufu sensed something between them, while Yang Yo suddenly looked uneasy as recalled that she was known as a toxic bully at school. Meanwhile, the twin ponytail girl asked Manmin if she knew the boy, sensing familiarity. Manmin hesitated before dismissing him as just a schoolmate. Yang Yo frowned in confusion before realization struck. The girl before him was Xiaobai Lugia, a magic profession instructor from Million Game Girls. Patting her head out of habit, he recalled doing it all the time back then. Xiaobai's expression darkened as she immediately cast an ice spell. The next moment, she hurled a freezing stab at him, shouting for him to keep his hands off her and questioning who gave him permission to touch her head. Yang Yo dodged, realizing she was a cranky loli. Turning back, as he noticed something shining on the ground. The headmaster creature had dropped a legendary item. The system alert urged him to pick it up, revealing it as a key. Checking the system, he had no idea if such an item existed in the game. Manmin warned him not to pick it up, saying it would bring trouble. Just as he turned to ask Zufu's opinion, a harsh smack sent him flying before he crashed onto the ground. A voice rang out as a hot Valkyrie with ridiculous clothes appeared, smirking as she finally caught up. She scoffed, complaining that the dungeon's boss was too weak and that Yangnyo had cleared it too fast. Her hand clutched his throat. Recognizing her as fallen Valkyrie Rubai, Yangnyo's eyes widened. She was supposed to be the penultimate boss of the battlefield of buried bones. Instead of answering, she threw the question back at him. Rubai's sinister smile deepened as she mocked him, asking if he wasn't the godly player who had just defeated Zufu. She hadn't seen him in a while, yet he was already this weak. Before she could squeeze tighter, a powerful energy surge erupted. Zufu stepped forward, her blade blossom technique making the air tremble. She warned Rubai to release her contractor or be stabbed right through. Rubai turned to Zufu, sneering as she accused her of thinking she could stop her after betraying the game's will. Without hesitation, she tightened her grip on Yangnyo's throat, boasting about her level 50 status and how she could wipe them all out in an instant. Meanwhile, Yangnyo, despite the life-threatening situation, had a completely different thought if she was such a high level, wondering her plots were still smaller than his wife's. Hearing this, Rubai froze for a split second before her face twisted in rage. Gritting her teeth, she vowed to make sure he died so thoroughly that even reviving wouldn't be an option. With a furious yell, she charged at him, landing a punch, except it never actually landed. To her shock, the attack was deflected. Furious when Manman stepped forward, holding up a glowing key. She explained that she had picked up a dropped item, triggering the system's reward tally, meaning no one could cause harm to players right now. Yangnyo checked his throat, now free from Rubai's grip, and smirked at her. He pointed out how she was so obsessed with him that she hadn't even noticed what Manman was up to. That realization hit Rubai. The jerk had mocked her flat chest just to piss her off. Fuming, she glared as her mana began to deplete. She spat out a final threat, promising that next time she would erase them all. But before she could do anything, her body flickered and started disappearing. A moment later, Yangnyo basked in his victory, grinning as the system flashed his rewards as his stage was cleared. As soon as the stage cleared, the school returned to normal. Students went about their day as if nothing strange had ever happened. The janitor, staring at his reflection in a mirror, was baffled that his golden tooth, which had been with him for years, had suddenly vanished. Meanwhile, the headmaster clutched his stomach in agony, regretting whatever questionable meal he had consumed. Yangnyo, relieved to be alive, turned to Manman with a grateful smile. He never imagined he'd have such a good rapport with the school idol. Manman, blushing, quickly looked away, mumbling that she had no idea what he was talking about. Zyobai told her to calm down. Before Yangnyo could bask in the moment, Zufu appeared behind him, reminding him that they had more important matters to discuss, like the fact that she had taken the key. Yangnyo, still relaxed, casually wondered about the glowing key since it had never existed in the game. Manman, adjusting her glasses, explained that the key she picked up was crucial. It prevented the game world from merging with reality. She held it up, revealing that whoever possessed it would become the enemy of the entire game world and be hunted forever. Unfortunately for Yangnyo, he had been identified as her party member, meaning he was now part of the mess. Zufu, looking guilty, apologized to Yangnyo for not explaining sooner. She revealed that both his world and the game world were real. The game world, fueled by deep resentment, used its instance dungeons to launch attacks on reality under the command of an unknown power. If no one interfered, the real world would be destroyed, while the game world would fragment into chaos. Zyobai stepped in, unfolding another layer of the mystery. She explained that in preparation for the merge, NPCs had become self-aware and were searching for contractors in the real world to stop it. The unexplored, mysterious floating island. She laid it out simply: if Yangnyo could collect the important keys, he would be able to open the passage to the floating island, where the answers awaited. As Yangnyo processed the weight of their mission, digesting the shocking truth, this game world would do everything in its power to stop them from collecting all the keys. Yet he couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity of the situation. Saving the world by playing video games, it sounded like something out of Excel World. Zufu, visibly embarrassed, apologized for dragging him into this mess. She knew it wasn't easy for him to process. Realizing it wasn't too late to back out, she offered to terminate the contract, saying she'd figure out a way to handle Ruby on her own. Yangnyo chuckled because the concern in her voice genuinely touched him, but his answer was a firm no. Manman and Zyobai stared at him in shock. Him choosing to fight made no sense. Manman especially couldn't understand. This was literally a fight for his life. He held up fingers saying there were two reasons. First, he declared, He was the strongest player in the entire game. Clearing any level without saves was child's play for him. Zufu listened, thinking it seemed she had picked the right guy. Then, he hesitated before revealing the second reason, rubbing his nose with a sheepish grin, saying his wife's big plot. Saying there was nowhere else he was going to find a wife with a 36 E-cup size. Zufu's face turned bright red before she lunged at him, fists flying. She couldn't believe she had misjudged him so badly, while he was fighting for such a vulgar reason. Yang-yo yelped, dodging her strikes as he quickly apologized, swearing he was just kidding. Finally, he sighed and admitted the truth. He wasn't good at anything in life except playing games. And now, if playing games meant he could save the world, then he had to do it. And he wouldn't do it alone, he would do it alongside his wife. His eyes softened as he turned to Manman, saying she had saved him once before. Now, it was his turn to return the favor. Manman, however, looked unimpressed, bored out of her mind. All their sickening lovey-dovey talk was making her sick, saying she hated gross otakus like him. With a scoff, she warned him to stay away from her in the future. But as she turned away, she hesitated, replaying his words in her mind. With a smirk, she glanced back. "Well, Mr. Strongest Player, I'll be looking forward to that." Just then, the school bell rang. Yang-yo's brows furrowed. The school was still standing, which meant classes were still happening. His anxiety spiked. His wife and Ziobai stuck out like sore thumbs here. Manman reminded him that his father was the head teacher. That gave her a solution. A few moments later, Ziobai and Zufu changed into school uniforms. Ziobai's uniform barely fit, looking oversized and making her homeless chick. Meanwhile, Zufu's was a tight fit, hugging her curves in a way that made her face turn red with embarrassment. Yang-yo, of course, made things worse by snapping pictures of her. With a shameless grin, he told her she looked amazing. After all, it wasn't every day a uniform worked overtime to highlight her premium assets. As long as they played along, Manman reassured, saying she would handle their school records and student IDs. As Zufu walked beside Yang-yo toward the school, the students around them take notice. Some guys were gossiping with jealousy about how lucky that scum Yang-yo was to have such a stunning girlfriend. Meanwhile, Zufu leaned in close as she whispered she wanted him to find a quiet place for just the two of them tonight. His face immediately turned bright red, as there was something she wanted to tell him. His mind went wild at the thought, shamelessly lingering on all the possibilities. That night Yang-yo chose the sports field as it was quiet. His heart pounded with excitement, as he was thinking whether Zufu had thought to bless him with the ultimate cultivation reward. His face blushed at the thought. But before he could get lost in his delusions, a blade came slicing toward him in a sneak attack. He barely dodged in time, as it slammed into the ground with a loud clang. Zufu stepped out of the shadows, saying as she expected, his reflexes were just as sharp in real life. Then she told him to get ready for a special training session. His mood soured at the thought that he was called here for special training. He groaned, saying he had already mastered every skill in the game. But then Zufu hesitated, her face turning slightly pink. Blushing, she explained that it was a skill only a Valkyrie and her partner could use when they combined, meaning they would need to perform dual cultivation. Yang-yo froze, his entire face burning like a furnace. In another location, Ruby sat on a rock near the sea, her face twisted in frustration. She hadn't seen it coming. Yang-yo had set her up, and the thought of his smug face made her blood boil. If he thought he was safe in the real world, he was dead wrong. She knew his school had fused with the game space, and she already had the coordinates. Plus, Manman and Ziobai had the key. With that in mind, she decided she'd be back soon. Back on the sports field, Yang-yo hesitated, turning to Zufu to confirm if she was serious about dual cultivation. With a shy tone, he admitted that his heart just wasn't ready to squeeze her lemons right up. Before Yang-yo could process her response, another attack came at him. Zufu quickly corrected him, explaining that the dual cultivation she meant was just training together. Without giving him a chance to recover, she activated her Blade Blossom technique, pushing him to his limits through battle. Then, she asked if he had mastered Data Awakening. Yang-yo was confused, hearing about it for the first time. A troubling thought crossed his mind, maybe the game he played all this time had never been real at all. Before he could dwell on it, a blade surged toward his legs. His instincts kicked in, and he jumped upward just in time, panic flooding his system. It dawned on him that she was seriously trying to snatch his joystick. Blades whizzed past him in mid-air, keeping him on high alert. Zufu went on, explaining that Data Awakening was a rare ability beyond levels, equipment, and skills. Mastering it was the only way to close the overwhelming power gap and take on stronger opponents. Choosing one of her larger blades, she shot Yangyo a sharp warning. If he couldn't master it, Ruby would eventually crush him, and if that was the case, she'd rather handle it herself. Without hesitation, she let the blade fly straight at him. Yangyo watched as the weapon hurtled toward him. A moment later, Zufu's eyes widened in disbelief. The blade stopped inches from him, as if an invisible force had smacked it away. Yangyo exhaled and casually remarked that there was no need to scare him like that. Then, with a smirk, he revealed another shocking truth. He could now see their HP bars. Zufu froze in astonishment. Wondering when he had learned, before she could finish her thought, Yangyo lunged at her. He drew his blade, and their weapons clashed in a flurry of sparks. Zufu barely managed to parry his attack in time. Yangyo grinned, explaining that he had only just learned Data Awakening. Ever since he realized the two worlds were merging, he had been eager to test the game's abilities in real life. After listening to her explanation, his suspicions had been confirmed. Running his fingers through her hair, he confidently asked how amazing he was. Without hesitation, Zufu responded by delivering a firm bonk on his head. She denied his claim, stating that he still had much to learn. What he had achieved was merely the most basic form of Data Awakening. Yangyo smirked, determined to prove himself further. He spread his arms, and a surge of blue mana erupted around him. The sheer force of it sent his hair flying backward, while Zufu instinctively raised her arms to shield her face. She couldn't help but feel impressed. A sudden explosion echoed in the distance. Yangyo's smirk faded as his eyes locked onto the source. Zufu felt it too that something was off. A hostile presence lingered in the air, creeping closer, and worst of all, it was someone they knew. At the sight of the explosion, Manman and Zyobai sat trembling, surrounded by smoke and dust. A shadowy figure rushed toward them, and as the dust settled, there was no mistaking that Ruby had arrived, as she barely had a scratch on her. Zyobai's heart sank as she checked her bag. Every potion she had brought was gone. They had made a critical mistake. Worse, they never expected Ruby to chase them into the real world. Ruby's sinister warning sent chills down their spines. She mocked them, asking if they had any final words. Then, without hesitation, she lunged, saying it's their time to die. Manman fearfully asked Zyobai to cast an ice spell. As Zyobai cast a spell to form a barrier, Ruby continued to taunt them, sneering at their pathetic attempt at defense. In a flash, she surged forward, crashing into the barrier with a resounding blast. As the shards of energy scattered, she laughed, mocking how their so-called protection shattered like cheap glass. As she landed, she wasted no time, lunging at them again. Zyobai, panic-stricken, scrambled to block her path. Ruby delivering a brutal kick to her face, sending her tumbling. Smirking coldly, she declared that once their contractor was dead, they'd be nothing more than helpless, broken players. Turning her gaze to Manman, Ruby stalked forward with slow, deliberate steps, giving her one last chance. Hand over the key, and she might just let her live. Even as her body trembled, Manman refused. Ruby wasted no time, delivering a ruthless slap that sent Manman's glasses flying before they clattered onto the ground. Gasping for breath, she barely had a moment to recover before Ruby's foot pressed against her rice cakes, like they were yesterday's leftovers. Scoffing, Ruby sneered at how pathetic players like her never truly felt the agony of being cut in battle, as that was the real injustice. Ruby raised her weapon high, bringing it down with cruel force, savoring the moment as she promised to take her time torturing her, while her flat chests looked similar to flats. Grinding her teeth, she promised to make her taste the agony of being on the losing side. Manman, with her beaten-up face, still had one thing to hold on to that Yangyo had promised to protect her. Before Ruby could strike again, blades materialized out of thin air, streaking toward her with blinding speed. Her eyes widened as she twisted to evade them, just in time hearing Yangyo and Zufu approaching. Yangyo strolled in with Zufu at his side, casually remarking that they had arrived just in time, apologizing for making Manman wait. With a confident smirk, he added that heroes always make their grand entrance at the last moment. He couldn't resist throwing in one last jab, mocking Ruby for being as flat as her chances of winning. Ruby's face twisted with rage as she snarled that Yangyo would die first for mocking her. Zufu warned her not to underestimate Yangyo. His mastery of Data Awakening made him more than enough to take her down. Ruby, momentarily startled by Zufu's presence, scoffed and invited them both to come at her. Yangyeo stepped forward, declaring that his wife had already spoken. Blue mana surged around him as he confidently stated that he alone was enough to handle her. Manman, watching the scene unfold, felt a wave of unease. The level gap was too vast, making her doubt if things would truly be okay. Xiaobai, however, was certain. Zufu wouldn't have allowed this unless she believed Yangyeo could win. Without warning, Ruby lunged, her weapon slicing through the air in a deadly arc. She charged with fierce determination, yet Yangyeo effortlessly dodged each strike, countering with ease. Frustration boiled within her as realization struck he had parried every single attack. Impossible. Snarling, she activated her so-called unbeatable technique, Ruby's doppelganger erasing method. Her body flickered, splitting into 3 identical illusions. She watched him closely, eager to see how he would handle 3 of her at once. With a beast-like smile, she reveled in her supposed advantage. No one had ever seen through this technique. Out of some twisted generosity, she even promised to be kind. She'd only slice him into 3 pieces. Yangyeo, however, just smirked. Before she could even process what was happening, a solid thud smashed into her ribs. Wiping that smug look right off her face, Ruby's eyes widened in shock. Somehow, he had pinpointed her real body despite all 3 doppelgangers looking identical. Frustration welled up within her. She couldn't recall a single player who had ever seen through this technique so quickly. Yangyeo, thinking that while the appearances were identical, his mastery of data awakening allowed him to perceive the vast difference in data between her real body and the clones. After reaching this level of mastery, seeing the weaknesses in her data was effortless. With a smirk, he added that he now knew her body as well as the back of his hand. Ruby cursed under her breath, refusing to accept defeat. Even if he could hit her, his trash equipment wouldn't be able to inflict any real damage. Before she could react, Yangyeo suddenly appeared behind her, whispering that he wasn't planning to hurt her. Instead, he had found her greatest weakness. Without warning, he wrapped his arms around her from behind and began tickling her ribs. Ruby's face burned a deep crimson as she shrieked, her body writhing uncontrollably. Tears welled in her eyes as she howled for him to stop, her voice filled with both rage and embarrassment. He had found the most ticklish spot on her body and exploited it mercilessly. Xiaobai, Manman, and Zufu stood frozen, their expressions wavering between amusement and bewilderment. Xiaobai asked Zufu, wondering if she had anticipated this from the start. Overwhelmed with second-hand embarrassment, Zufu admitted that even she hadn't expected things to turn out like this. Ruby, now lying breathless on the floor, weakly surrenders. Through ragged breaths, she begged him to stop, admitting defeat. Satisfied, Yangyeo agreed to let it slide this time, but warned her not to cause any more trouble. Still panting, Ruby propped herself up and glared at him. Huffing, she stated that he should be afraid. If he thought that little stunt would work twice, he was sorely mistaken. Yangyeo leaned back, completely relaxed, and casually replied that it was a good thing she was a Valkyrie. Since she had given her word, she would surely keep it. Besides, even if they fought again, he was confident that he would win. Ruby in frustration, turning away with a scowl. She vowed to remember this humiliation, swearing she'll return to settle the score. Without another word, she vanished into thin air, vowing revenge. Yangyeo let out a hearty laugh, amused by her reaction, while the girls clearly shaken. Meanwhile, 2 figures stood on a nearby building, watching the whole mess unfold. The brown-haired guy and the rabbit-eared girl looked on with a mix of awe and amusement, recognizing Yangyeo's power. As expected from the strongest player, though, he was surprised by how Yangyeo used such a weird tactic to take down a fallen Valkyrie. They too dropped down and walked up to Yangyeo, deciding to introduce. The brown-haired guy bowed and introduced himself as Jianwu, while the rabbit-eared girl beside him was Qianfeng. Yangyeo nodded in recognition, much to Jianwu's surprise. The fact that the top player even knew nobody like him, he was not expecting. Before the shock could settle, Qianfeng cut in, requesting Yangyeo to hand over 1,000 copies of iron ore, herbs, and wood. Yangyeo's expression darkened as realization struck. He pointed at her, reminding her that she was the NPC who had issued that insanely difficult gathering quest, forcing him to cut trees and dig for weeks on end. Jianwu blinked, piecing things together. Yangyeo was clearly referring to Qianfeng, but she wasn't actually an NPC. Clarifying the situation, Jianwu explained that, like Yangyeo, both he and Qianfeng were players who had been acknowledged by the game's characters. He then elaborated further, stating that ever since the game World Invasion, many players had undergone similar experiences. To unite their strength, the players had established an organization called Tianxia, dedicated to fighting back. Wrapping up his explanation, he extended an offer, asking if Yang Yeo and his companions were interested in joining them. Yang Yeo hesitated, turning to Zufu for her opinion. He wondered aloud if this was like forming a guild in a traditional game. Zufu took a moment to think before replying. She said that if more players teamed up, their chances of saving the world would definitely go up. As they considered the proposal, Xiaobai and Manman approached, offering some energy potions. They pointed out that Manman had exhausted her medicine during the battle against the Valkyrie, ensuring she would recover before the next fight. Xiaobai and Manman exchanged a confused glance as they accepted the energy potions. Since they had extras, they handed them over like casual party favors. Without a second thought, they drank potions, watching their health bars refill almost instantly. A flicker of gratitude crossed their faces as they realized that rolling with an organized group was way better than solo suffering. Seeing their agreement, Jianwu and Qianfeng wasted no time taking charge. Upon arriving at an unfinished construction site, the skeletal framework loomed overhead. Jianwu came to an open space, stating that their boss was here. Yang Yeo scanned the surroundings, realizing there was no one in sight. Just as confusion settled in, a voice echoed from above, followed by a sharp, mocking laugh. He heard someone saying the so-called strongest player had not been seen in a few days and already looked so weak. Yang Yeo's gaze snapped upward, searching for the source of the voice. The air around him grew tense. A man stood on the rooftop, enjoying the presence of his hot baddie, as she leaned comfortably into his grasp. His expression carried a hint of amusement as he chuckled, saying it had been a long time since the all-server player challenge. He then added that Yang Yeo better not have forgotten him, that would really break his heart. Recognition flashed across Yang Yeo's face, if it wasn't the so-called reincarnated king, or rather, period, as there seemed to be no reason to stop calling him that. Period's expression twisted in irritation as he cursed him and demanded that the name Period be abandoned, complaining that some random nobody had snatched the username Reincarnated King before he could claim it himself. Ignoring his outrage, Yang Yeo's attention briefly shifted to the woman beside him. The so-called hot baddie appeared amused by the interaction, leaning comfortably into Period's grasp. Period smirked, saying about Zufu the fact that Yang Yeo had been chosen by the NPCs had been unexpected, but he had even obtained the strongest Valkyrie as his partner. The jealousy in his tone was apparent as he commented on Zufu's huge plots, wondering if she had already been properly trained and disciplined by Yang Yeo. Jianwu turned toward Yang Yeo, informing the man standing before them was none other than the leader of Tianxia Group. A disbelief crossed Yang Yeo's face that this kind of rotten person was leading the organization. Meanwhile, Period's hot baddie leaned in, reminding him about Yang Yeo, the one who had humiliated him before. But then, she pointed out a problem. If Yang Yeo joined them, his position as boss wouldn't be so secure anymore. She whispering a twisted idea that demands Yang Yeo to hand over Zufu. Not only would it weaken his combat power, but Period would also get to enjoy the strong and hot Valkyrie. It's like crushing two birds with one stone, he grinned, fully sold on the devious plan. Without hesitation, he addressed Yang Yeo, stating that the offer to join Tianxia still stood, but only under one condition. Zufu had to be handed over, destined to be his personal plaything. Yang Yeo reacted instantly, stepping in front of Zufu like a shield. A sharp, cold amusement flickered in his eyes. Wondering Period actually thought he would just hand her over, realizing the guy had completely lost it. Period loudly declared from above that he would take that as a no, but added that he must have her, even if it meant snatching her from Yang Yeo himself. Yang Yeo, unfazed, offered him a fight as mana surged around him. Just as he alerted his team, his gaze fell on Manman, her health bar dangerously low. A sinking realization hit, she had been poisoned. Recalling the potion from earlier, suspicion crept in as he turned to Jianwu for answers. But Jianwu simply shrugged, stating that Yang Yeo had no right to question their boss. Meanwhile, Qianfeng let out a sly, snickering laugh. Period, gripping his weapon tightly, with a smug grin. He pointed out that Yang Yeo's teammates were in no condition to fight, leaving him with only two choices, hand over Zufu or die. Yang Yeo refused, stating that he would never entertain smug guys like Period. In response, Period swung his sword, declaring that they would fight. Without hesitation, he leaped forward, announcing that this was the perfect opportunity to settle an old score. he ordered the others to stay out of it, adding that they would fight to the death. If he won, Zufu would belong to him. Landing right in front of Yangyeo, his sword clashed against Yangyeo's blade. However, before Yangyeo was a blade infused with Zufu's technique. Yangyeo, reminding him of his place, says that he is 20,000 years too early to even dream of touching his wife. Zufu, using her blade blossom technique, the air around her humming with energy as she warned Period not to come any closer. Period attempted to strike Yangyeo again, only to end up slamming his own sword into the ground. Meanwhile, Yangyeo asked him, wondering why players insisted on fighting each other, instead of working together to prevent the worlds from merging. Yet, Period couldn't have cared less. Yangyeo tried to warn him about the absolute disaster that would unfold if the two worlds fused, but Period just nodded along like he got it, then kept swinging like a stubborn toddler with a stick. Yangyeo had no choice but to keep dodging. Period then launched into his own delusional monologue, claiming that once the game world merged with reality, society would crumble, which, in his mind, was a glow-up. He believed only the top players would be strong enough to survive, with the rest forced to depend on them. Imagining him, in this grand fantasy, that he was at the top, lounging on a throne as countless people bowed at his feet. In his eyes, the chosen players wouldn't just be relied upon, they'd be worshipped as gods. A woman slid up behind Period, wrapping her arms around his neck as she purred in agreement that a top player like him is a god among gods. Period laughed. He was fully sold on the fantasy. Yangyeo raised his leg and drove a powerful kick straight into Period's stomach, sending him flying backward. As Period crashed to the ground, Yangyeo charged at him again, calling him out for scheming against Manman and murdering other players just to feed his own ego. Period didn't even bother denying it. Instead, he revealed his real motivation. Once the game world merged with reality, all the fiery femmes from the game would come to real life. The absurdity of the thought alone had him and Yangyeo practically drooling, lost in their own degenerate daydreams. Yangyeo shook off the same pathetic temptation and snapped back to reality, realizing this reasoning was just as unacceptable as how anyone could ignore an impending disaster just because they saw personal benefits. Saying that he had already erased too many in this chaos, he decided it was time to put an end to Period. However, Period swung his sword once more, issuing a challenge. He reminded Yangyeo of the massive level gap, taunting him with the overwhelming difference in their strength. Yangyeo quickly analyzed the situation, realizing that defeating Period head-on was impossible. He needed to level up if he wanted to stand a chance. Period mocked him, calling him a cowardly rat who only knew how to run. He insisted that Yangyeo could never win a battle by dodging alone. Raising his sword, Period brought it down in a powerful strike, adding that his stamina was far greater than Yangyeo's. Yangyeo blocked the attack but was forced to fall back, gripping his weapon tightly. The next moment, he leaped away, escaping the confines of the building. Standing outside, he acknowledged that Period's stats were undeniably higher than his own. However, he smirked, pointing out that Period had never bothered to invest in intelligence. Period frowned, confused by the statement. As he tried to process it, the sound of multiple cracks echoed through the air. Walls and ceilings around him began to fracture. Yangyeo revealed that he had just slashed several load-bearing columns of the abandoned building. Now, it was time to witness the raw power of physics. Period glanced upward, his expression shifting from confusion to horror. Within moments, the entire structure collapsed, burying him under the rubble. Yangyeo turned, only to be met with an unsettling sight. Two men stood nearby, holding Xiaobai in grasp. She remained helpless, struggling to break free. One of them commented on how much cuter she looked in reality, while the other grinned, stating that he had a particular fondness for lolis and would love to squeeze her small lemons. Meanwhile, Zufu found herself facing off against three other scumbags, each attempting to capture her. Yangyeo appeared, as he commanded them not to lay a hand on Manman or Xiaobai. His eyes burned with defiance as he challenged them to face him directly, just as Period had done. However, Guy merely laughed mockingly, questioning why they would surrender their hostages so easily. He sneered, claiming he would have so much fun with Xiaobai. Xiaobai struggled in his grasp, demanding to be released, while Jianwu held Manman tightly, his grip possessive as he shamelessly admired her overwhelming plot development. Yangyeo, sword in hand, stepped forward, prepared to fight. But before he could engage, Period's baddie lunged at him with a swift kick, her opening wide enough to host a grand entrance, warning that caring too much for his weak companions would only distract him. Before her attack could land, Yangyeo caught her leg mid-air, slamming her onto the ground, her huge melons landing first. While pinned beneath her own assets, she groaned in frustration. In the next moment, he twisted her arm behind her back, locking her in place. His voice was sharp as he taunted her, accusing her of thinking he would lower his guard so easily. Then, turning to the rest of the scumbags, he declared that he now had their boss's partner as his shield. Ahugia gritted her teeth as realization struck that she had been baited on purpose. Meanwhile, beneath the rubble, Period struggled to emerge, his health bar dangerously low. Rage filled his expression as he seethed at Yangyeo's underhanded tactics. But as he stepped out, his fury was met with shock. Yangyeo stood there, holding Ahugia hostage, a blade pressed to her throat, making her immobile. Yangyeo's voice was firm as he called out Period's hypocrisy, pointing out how his men had used dirty tricks to capture his own companions. He demanded Period order his men to release Manman and Ziobai and allow them to leave the premises. Ahugia, still restrained, fumed internally that he was treating her as if she were some helpless pushover, thinking if she unleashed her true strength, everyone here would be in for a surprise. Period's rage simmered, and with a begrudging nod, he agreed to the trade, stating that Ahugia was too weak and requesting that Yangyeo not hurt her. Ahugia's eyes widened in disbelief, thinking she hid it well. Jianwu objected immediately, urging Period to seize the opportunity. But before he could finish his thought, Period roared in anger and ordered the release of the hostages, as Ahugia was his baddie. Moments later, Ziobai and Manman were freed, their unconscious bodies supported by Yangyeo. Zufu, standing guard, sent a stern warning to their enemies. Ahugia, now glued to him like a needy ex, immediately started whining about all the bullying, as if trauma dumping was the fastest way to a man's heart. Period, meanwhile, probably enjoying her drama. As Yangyeo locked eyes with Period, silently vowed to remember everything Period had done. Period, on the other hand, smirked to himself that Yangyeo thought he could intimidate him. But this time, he had been careless. Next time, he wouldn't hold back. The group finally reached Manman's grand house, where Zufu and Yangyeo settled into the living room. Yangyeo, inquiring about their condition. Zufu sighed, reporting that Manman's potion had stabilized her for now, and that both girls were fine, though they remained in shock and needed rest. Zufu kicked herself for being so dense that she had thought an alliance with other players was the right move. Yet she had failed to foresee how despicable some of them could be. Yangyeo leaned forward, reminded her not to be too hard on herself, as he came near her to reassure her. Then he sat near Zufu. He pulled out his phone, thinking about the commotion back there. Surely, someone must have captured a video. However, as he scrolled, his brows furrowed in confusion as something strange had just been reported. Yangyeo's phone lit up with breaking news, the screen filled with frantic reporters covering a shocking development. Strange creatures, massive, grotesque, and very real, had started appearing all over the world. The footage showed no signs of editing. Every recording was raw, taken directly from the scene of destruction. These monsters weren't just for show. They had already torn through cities, leaving nothing but ruins in their wake. The death toll had climbed past 4 figures, and the chaos wasn't limited to land. Enormous, unidentified creatures had been spotted in the ocean, blocking major waterways, including the world's largest man-made canal and even the Amazon River. Authorities were still struggling to assess the full scale of the damage. Yangyeo stared at the screen, his stomach twisting. This wasn't some prank or wild conspiracy theory. It felt like the beginning of the end. The reporter then dropped another bombshell. Rumors were circulating that these creatures looked eerily similar to the ones from Million Game Girls. As the broadcast ended, Yangyeo sat frozen for a moment before jolting upright. He turned his back to Zufu, urgency in his voice, as he announced that game monsters had started spawning near his city. There was no way he was going to sit around and wait for things to get worse. He had decided to go out and grind some exp. Zufu immediately stepped in front of him, concern flashing across her face. She didn't like the idea of him heading out alone. Yangyeo smirked at her worry, but reasoned that with Ziobai and Manman still asleep, someone needed to stay behind and watch over them in case they were attacked. Yangyeo pulled Zufu closer, while her melons pressed against him as he reassured her. With a confident smirk, he reminded her that he was the strongest player, so all he had to do was hunt down a few weak monsters. There was nothing to worry about, he would be fine. As the moment to leave arrived, Zufu's expression remained tense. Despite his reassurance, she couldn't hide her concern. She gently reminded him to be careful. At a different location, lovey-dovey noises echoed from a camp while a group of people stood guard outside, including Jianwu, who was keeping watch and waiting for his boss. Inside, Period was in the mood with his flashy, over-the-top companion, Ahuja. Meanwhile, adding to his frustration, that scumbag Yangyeo had hurt her, and he swore not to lose to him again. She reassured him with a sultry smile that her injuries weren't that bad. Ahuja, leaning back against the sofa, pushing out her massive melons while extending her leg toward him, teasingly asking him to massage it since Yangyeo had twisted her ankle. Period, despite cringing internally at her dramatic request, had no problem complying. He eagerly sat between her legs, his thoughts turning playful as he enjoying the up-close view of her massive plots. Meanwhile, Ahuja's inner thoughts were far from innocent. Seeing how easily Period was falling for her charms, she smirked to herself, thinking that men were ridiculously easy to manipulate. Deciding to use him to take down more players, she continued to act sweet and vulnerable. Meanwhile, Period excitedly suggested she try out his ancestral tongue massage technique. Outside the camp, Jianwu suddenly received urgent news. Monsters from Million Game Girls had started appearing in the real world. Seeing a golden opportunity to slay them and rack up some XP, he made up his mind to head out. One of his group members asked if they should inform the boss, but as Jianwu listened to the happy noises still coming from Period's camp, he figured it was best not to interrupt. Still, in the back of his mind, he remained cautious. If that idiot Period tagged along, he'd probably hog all the monster races for himself. Deciding he couldn't let the level gap between them get too big, he made up his mind to head out first. At another location, inside a grand castle, Rubai was in a pitiful state, crying, begging, and groveling for forgiveness. Baya, her lord, had her pinned on her lap, locking her in place while mercilessly spanking her rice cakes. Through her sobs, Rubai admitted she deserved to die for her failure. She hadn't managed to capture that insane Yangyeo or secure the key. Desperate, she pleaded for one more chance. But Baya wasn't having any of it. Unmoved by Rubai's tears, she reminded her of the key's significance. It wasn't just some random item preventing the world from merging, it possessed special powers. Yet despite knowing how crucial it was, Rubai had still failed. With an icy tone, Baya demanded to know if the enemy had been too strong. Shaking her head, Rubai confessed that Yangyeo's level was actually quite low. She had just wanted to show off some of her moves, which led to her underestimating him. With saliva dripping from her mouth and her plots crushing against Baya's knees, she gasped for air, still being harshly punished. She begged for another chance, swearing that this time, she would erase him for sure. But Baya had already decided. She coldly stated that she had sent Kyulu instead. Unlike Rubai, Kyulu wouldn't play around, she would finish the job. At that moment, fury burned inside Rubai. In the back of her mind, she cursed Kyulu, that disgusting, two-faced witch. Unlike her, Kyulu actually enjoyed playing with her victims. The realization hit Rubai hard. If Kyulu erased Yangyeo, she wouldn't be able to take her revenge herself. The thought alone drove her insane. Meanwhile, back in Yangyeo City, all chaos had broken loose. Monsters tore through buildings, reducing them to rubble. Terrified people ran for their lives as chaos spread like wildfire. A young girl, sprinting desperately to escape, suddenly lost her footing and crashed to the ground. As she turned to see the monster lunging at her, fear paralyzed her body. But just as the creature was about to strike, Yangyeo appeared, gripping his sword, his expression unwavering. As ruthless enemies closed in, hungry for the key, would Yangyeo crush them or get wrecked trying? Comment strongest player if you're eager to find out in our part 2. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. As always, thanks for watching.